first thing we're going to do very briefly is talk about what is the CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model. I think probably almost everyone here is familiar with that, so I won't belabor it. This is a model put together by the U.S. Government agency called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And by the way, all the slides and the resources are available online. There's a QR code at the end, so it's all going to be there. They've identified 5 core pillars. You can see them across the Grecian temple there. 3 cross-cutting elements around visibility and analytics, automation, orchestration, and governance, and then define 4 levels of maturity. This is version 2 of the model. So the first one came out about 2.5 years ago. They took public comment as well as feedback from government agencies, and they came out with version 2 in April. And it's not dramatically different from V1, but it's refined, and the back channel on version 1, it was kind of a hurry up and publish this thing because, so it was, I won't say it was rushed. I think it was pushed out quickly. So the fact that they've taken time and gotten feedback and revised it and refreshed it and improved it in V2 is a good step forward. It's more or less become the de facto model and way of thinking about maturity in the industry for Zero Trust. There are other maturity models. The United States Department of Defense has one as well. This one has largely become widely accepted. There's nothing wrong with the DoD model. It's just this is what people have centered on. Now, the way they've organized this, and I know that's impossible to read, is these 4 levels with these 5 pillars. But what I'm trying to illustrate here is at each of these levels, they give you some bullet points and essentially tell you this is what your organization should look like. In the identity pillar, if you're at the initial level, you should generally have these types of characteristics. And as you improve, it's going to look a little bit different. In the document, there's a further detail level of breakdown, further breakdown in more detail. So what they've done is I identified 40 in aggregate functions, and you can see 7 or 8 of them here for the networks. And what they've done is for each of these, they've given you a description of what, they use the word agency because this is intended for federal, but it means it's also applicable to enterprises, is what are the attributes of your organization? What should they look like at these different levels? Now, this isn't carved in stone and it's not gospel, so you can and you should feel free to thoughtfully consider changing this or adapting it to your organization. There's no law that says, oh, you've got to get to optimal exactly based on the words in the description here for your organization. So definitely keep this in mind, but also keep in mind that it could be a pretty labor-intensive process to get agreement inside of your organization. So you have to balance that out and understand, well, if I want to change what our target is for our organization, what's it going to take to do that? Can I do that unilaterally with my small team? Do I have to go through some sort of governance council, et cetera? I think because this is not a legal mandate for the private sector, you do have the capability to do that. And I think I would say, err on the side of having the freedom, be empowered to do that, but don't spend a huge amount of time doing that because that's just paperwork at the end of the day. And ultimately, we have to improve our security and deliver business value. And really, what we have to do is answer the question, how does my organization, where I work, get from initial to advanced? In my environment, with all the constraints that I have on me from a budget and technology and people perspective, and kind of secondarily, right, are these attributes appropriate for my organization or should I change them along the way? Now, to help this, I put together a freely available spreadsheet version of this maturity model with some interactivity, and the link will be provided at the end. Basically, what you do is, for each of those 40 functions, you look at this, you make a decision, and you click the drop down, and you say, okay, I'm at traditional for this particular function. And then as you go through that, this gets graphically rendered on the page. So you have a nice, easy way of looking at this across all the functions. So in general, do take the time to read through the CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model. Decide, is it applicable to your enterprise, kind of at the macro level? Is an assessment something that makes sense for your enterprise? And in many cases it does, but be empowered to define or redefine or change things to match your enterprise's journey, because not everything that CISA recommends can or should be applied to every enterprise. Evaluate where you are today, and you can time box this as well. You can decide to spend as much or as little time on doing that because, as some of you have directly experienced, Joe, you could spend 12 months going through and trying to do this comprehensively in your organization, and that would be a huge amount of time and it wouldn't deliver any direct value to the business. So you got to balance this out. Right? This is important to know where you're strong and where you're weak. It's important to have a roadmap of saying, we really stink at device management, and this is a nice roadmap for us to improve that. But ultimately, you got to turn it into action. And the best way to do that is to really tie what you're doing to, of course, your organizational needs, your organizational drivers and priorities, and use these security projects as a way to deliver business value. Or maybe even look at it inversely and say, what strategic business initiatives or drivers is my organization prioritizing, and how do I use those to improve security? Oh, we are closing all of our data centers and moving up into cloud environments. Great. How do we, our security team, enable that more quickly and more securely as the organization makes this transition? And one way to think about this is this simple model I came up with called a security project driver model. And you'll see that in a couple of slides. It's just a really simple way of kind of mapping where a technical project falls and what the drivers are behind that. But to make this a little bit real, I put together a fictional case study. And like all good fictional case studies, it involves my dog, Scully. So Scully, in addition to being the world's best, laziest dog, is an entrepreneur. So he has a pet toy company in this fictional world. And he's been pretty successful. He has a manufacturing facility. He sells this directly as well as through retailers. He's got around 2,000 employees, believe it or not. And he, against my better advice, he decided to launch and create a new set of smart toys, smart pet toys that are connected to their cloud. They're AI-driven. They got all sorts of sensors, and they can interact in your house. Nothing can go wrong with this scenario. But he wanted to do it. He's stubborn, so he's doing that new project. So first thing that the security team did was to go through a zero trust maturity assessment. And at the very high level, you can see these are the first three areas. They're okay. On the identity side, they say, we do an okay job here. We're reasonably good on the human identity side with authentication and MFA, et cetera. We're not good on the OT side. So they've got, obviously, manufacturing systems, and they're pretty weak there. They are good on devices. They went through an initiative recently they completed to update user devices. They got device management software, endpoint management software. But on the OT device side, they're weak. Their networks are so-so. They really haven't updated them in a long time. They have pretty flat networks, just very basic segmentation. The OT network is completely flat. They do use HTTPS everywhere. They invested in putting that certificate management system in place. But other areas of network management are pretty basic. On the applications and workloads, they mostly use COTS applications, common off-the-shelf software, so there's not a lot of software development historically in this organization. They are now moving to DevOps. They have spun up this new cloud environment for this new security cloud they're creating for this connected smart toys. It's still very nascent, still in pre-production, so they've got a lot to learn there. It's not very automated yet, but they do have big plans to completely automate things from a DevOps perspective. They've made some inconsistent investments in their data security. They're not good with data inventory or categorization. They do have a third-party provider doing the e-commerce, so they don't have to worry about PCI, DSS. And they haven't really invested in prioritizing the cross-cutting concerns. So this is kind of their assessment around this. Now, one of the things to think about is if you do or when you do this assessment, it can be pretty daunting. Not just doing the assessment of interviewing people and arguing about, are we a 2 or a 3 for data availability and data access? What does this even mean? But even the follow-up can be daunting because you say, well, geez, there's 40 different things here. Now we have to have 40 different work streams. It's crazy. So you can't do that, right? You got to, number one, be able to keep the business operating and do your day jobs. So the thing to think about is work on improving one area at a time and do it in a way that is mostly tied to a business initiative or something that's delivering business value. You can think about it as one protect surface at a time. If you remember what George Finney was talking about yesterday, the notion of using a protect surface and building the zero trust access paths and the policies around that. And really, you want most of your projects to have a business driver, not purely a security driver. which brings us to this security project driver model. So really simple structure. And I know I'm breaking all the rules because it's a 2x3 matrix, not a 2x2 matrix, but I wanted to be an overachiever here. So the idea behind this is that the horizontal axis shows the degree to which this project is driven by security or driven by business or something in between. And the vertical axis is intended to show, is this something that's really more tactical? Is it a technical project? Or is it tied, more importantly, to a strategic initiative? Or is it driven by an executive champion in that? And the color coding is an indication of the risk of organizational resistance. And this is really important because I've seen a lot of zero trust projects struggle when you don't have organizational buy-in. When it becomes the security team pushing this rock uphill, you get a lot of pushback, and everyone finds excuses for why you can't do this. Oh, you know what? You got to go through the operations team. What's the DR plan for this? How are we logging this? Are you sure you're meeting compliance? I'm sure we've all encountered people who are masters at throwing wrenches in the gears and slowing things down inside a big organization. So you want to avoid that. And the best way to avoid that is you've got an executive driver, or there's a real business need to do this. Or this is a technical project, but you know what? It's pretty much behind the scenes, doesn't really impact people. It's in our domain. We can just go ahead and do it. So if we look at Scully's organization, the blue shaded circles are ones that they completed recently. So the first is they had some issues with data. They had a minor ransomware incident. They lost some data. And they said, you know what? From the top, we can't do this again. Scully was pounding his furry fist on the table, and they implemented a data backup and restore project. Pretty technical back-end stuff, didn't really impact most of the users, so there wasn't a lot of risk there. They also invested in updating or upgrading user devices, and obviously this does impact the end users. It was a somewhat tactical project because it didn't really change anything, but the end users like this, they got newer devices, they supported BYOD, they supported Macs, et cetera. The nude ones, you can see, and we'll talk about those, fall into two categories. The first is the OT network segmentation. Pretty tactical project. It's not going to impact or shouldn't impact the way that the manufacturing teams operate, but there's good business reasons to do that, as we'll see. And the other one is this very strategic business initiative to invest and launch these new smart toys. And that's one that everyone's excited about. This is new technology. They're starting from scratch. They got a new brand around this. So there's a lot of support inside the organization, and they get to break rules or make new rules around this. So let's talk about the first one, is the OT network segmentation. Now, the challenge around this, the catalyst for this are, number one, they have a longtime employee, Sally, who runs the OT and manufacturing side of things. And she's been with the organization a long time. So she knows how everything works in the OT environment, which is great, except she's the only one that knows how things work. They also had a near miss on ransomware. They had a Windows device that was infected and was taken over. They lucked out that ransomware was not able to spread to other devices on the network, but they realized it certainly could have. So what they're going to do is take an inventory of the devices and the transaction flows in the network and document them, put in place some basic visibility, networking, network monitoring, put in place governance and change management processes, because the way it works today is Sally thinks about it and says, yes, no, we'll do this differently, and then start to put in place some network segmentation. So all of these things are having them progress down various pillars in the system maturity model. They also defined a number of metrics that can apply and will help them measure the way that they're proceeding down these for this particular project. Some of them you can see are percentages, and some of them are absolute numbers. And that's always a good mixture to have. You don't want to have just percentages or just absolute numbers. This lets them obviously track things over time and see, hey, are we improving? We plateaued, is that okay? Or is there a problem and we want to get up to 100% of whatever that particular metric is? So in terms of a timeline, today, as I mentioned, you just ask Sally. She knows everything. She makes good decisions. We don't really have problems, but she's going to be retiring, and she goes on vacation, and she's out sick sometimes. So what they want to do is, and this is a pretty short-term project. In just about a month, they want to start and document the inventory of what's on the network. Now, this is a manufacturing network. It does not change that often or frequently, so it's okay to do this manually. They want to set up a change management board they never had. Sally will be the chair of that. And They want to start to develop the plans for network segmentation, put in place some tools and some policy enforcement points, but not actually turn on the enforcement yet. And then in about 3 months, have a full and accurate inventory. Again, it's okay that things change manually. Things require manual updates because it's a pretty static environment. They will have shifted to a regular change management board, and Sally will be a participant, but not the leader. And they begin to enforce network segmentation with change board oversight. This is a pretty conservative plan, and they're pretty happy with it. Sally is happy because she can start to work part-time and retire without guilt, and they're going to get to a better place, both operationally, from a resilience perspective, visibility, as well as from governance. Now, if we think about the second environment, the Smart Toys Cloud. So this is a much bigger, more strategic initiative, and this is something where Scully himself said, all right, we're going to invest a lot in this, and it's gotten everyone really excited because R&D is creating new smart toys. They're hiring and partnering with software developers to build this entire new platform for this, and adopting DevOps in their environment, which they've never had. They've never written really any sort of software of substance in this organization. They also want to enable their development partners to securely access this. They want to segregate or separate the cloud environment, the infrastructure as a service environment of choice, from their enterprise WAN, because that's how they got started, but they definitely want to move away from that to keep it separate. They want to have a way to start to improve their maturity and automation around DevOps and DevSecOps, and begin to have an environment that can operate and deploy at scale and with automation. And they have a plan for a staged set of beta and then preview and then production rollouts in this environment. They've also defined a number of metrics you can see here, percentage of production access that is controlled by zero trust policies, et cetera, as well as the number of deployments per week and the number of hours spent on on the deployments. Good standard basic DevOps type of metrics and measurement. So in terms of this is obviously a much longer project, given that it's not just security related, but it's dependent on writing code, on launching products, designing the products, getting them in manufacturing, et cetera. So today they've got essentially a proof of concept level of maturity around the DevOps environment. They don't have a lot of distinction between development and test and production, and they have access control policies that are largely manually created. And when they encounter problems, which of course they do a lot because it's development, there's a lot of manual activity that has to go to do troubleshooting, to do review of what's going on, and analysis of workloads. So what they want to get to is in 2 months say, look, we want to have a beta and a preview environment, so we want to have separate environments. We want to have clear processes that separate our development test and soon-to-be production environments at a network layer, at a process layer, at a security layer. And we want to have our access policies be driven mostly as code. So there's as little human interaction, as little creativity, meaning margin for error, room for mistake, around those access policies to get humans out of the loop on that. It's okay that they're saying in 2 months it's okay if we're still doing things manually, and we do have a change team, a change board for DevOps to control configuration changes to the infrastructure itself. But in 6 months, they want to have full production deployment. They want to have a very clear separation of those environments without manual interaction, and they want all access to be driven as code. They want to have immutable infrastructure and deployment so that if something goes wrong, or if there's a vulnerability, or they just had a new version, they tear it down, they spin up the new one based on the new image, and it gets updated. Your classic kind of best practices around DevOps. And they want to have smooth governance processes for making changes or expanding the scope, whether they have a new capability, they say, hey, we want to make use of this new auto-transcription or voice-to-text process, whatever it is, let's have a governance process for rolling that out and make sure that, of course, functionally it works, but from a security perspective, that we're not introducing vulnerabilities, that we are not reducing or introducing risk of data exposure, et cetera. So in conclusion around this, I think this is a really useful model. I think there certainly doesn't require major changes in your organization. I think the 4 levels of maturity feels right. It's in the Goldilocks zone, right? 3 is probably too few, and 5 or more is just going to be too many. And This is a reasonable level of distinction. The key is, the next level of detail on this is making sure that you understand and feel good about where are we going from here to there in the maturity model. So don't be afraid also to adapt it, track your progress through it, but also remember that this can't be your goal, your sole goal. Your primary goal needs to be delivering value to the business, enabling people in the business to do their jobs more efficiently and more securely, and to help the business accomplish its larger mission. So in this case, the larger mission for Scully was allow Sally to retire without guilt, to make sure the OT environment, the manufacturing environment is stable and secure, and enable this exciting new line of business of these cloud-connected smart toys. In your world, of course, there's I guess I should say, there's going to be some homework for you, right? Talk to your peers in the organization, find out what's important to the business, what are the drivers, what initiatives are going on, and try to tailor your security initiatives to those so you can avoid the likelihood of organizational resistance. And then use that as a mechanism to improve your maturity across these various pillars and across these various functions. So with that, I know we've got about a minute and a half or so. Here's the QR code for the resources on the site. My contact information is there. All right, thank you.